You are welcome to yet another episode of HN What's Your Say? The #1 listening show, where we discuss real issues with real people like you. We are still featuring R. Kelly. Real name Robert Sylvester Kelly. Also known as the R&B King. In the discourse surrounding the high-profile case of R. Kelly, there are many troubling aspects that have demanded scrutiny, both from a legal standpoint and in terms of public opinion. But one of the most consistently overlooked and deeply unsettling issues is the narrative framework within which his accusers' stories have been accepted at face value, with limited critical analysis applied to the context and circumstances surrounding their claims. What makes this particularly concerning is a recurring theme in many of these stories. Stories that allege horrific abuse, manipulation and coercion yet simultaneously contain accounts that seem to contradict the very foundation of such claims. Specifically, many of the women who have come forward to accuse R. Kelly of abuse continued to stay with him, live with him, and even travel with him long after the said abusive events had allegedly occurred. This paradox cannot be dismissed lightly. In the majority of narratives told by accusers, there is no consistent indication that R. Kelly used physical force or imprisonment to keep these women from leaving. In fact, no account on the record, none includes a story of an attempted escape being forcibly stopped, or of someone being physically restrained or locked in against their will. Now, this is not a matter of victim blaming. It's a matter of examining the logical consistency within the very testimonies that have formed the bedrock of the public condemnation against R. Kelly. When an individual claims they were abused and yet simultaneously reports being able to leave, move about freely and even leave the house to go shopping or to pick some items from their family members, it raises critical questions about the narrative being presented. Take for example the testimony of Diana Copeland, a former assistant to R. Kelly who stated under oath that the doors to R. Kelly's residence were always open. According to her, just as the doors were open for those who wished to come in, they were equally open to those who wished to leave.
When this case came up, I'm reading that women are locked up and kidnapped and these things of that nature. And that's not what I'm seeing. I'm not seeing anybody that's trying to leave or any locked doors.
This alone undercuts the widely propagated image of R. Kelly as some sort of jailer or captor. In a context of real coercive abuse and imprisonment, the victim does not have the luxury of free movement or of walking in and out of a door at will. If we examine this carefully, we find that this isn't merely one isolated account. Many of the women who testified or gave interviews openly acknowledged that they had the opportunity to leave. Some even did leave temporarily but then returned. One woman, for instance, stated she left R. Kelly's building to go pick up a pair of shoes from her uncle. Think about that. She didn't escape. She didn't sneak out in the dead of night. She simply left, retrieved something she needed and came back. There was no mention of her being stopped, followed or coerced to return. No one was dispatched to drag her back. No locks, no threats, no force. She had the agency and the freedom to walk out the door, and yet she returned voluntarily. How do we reconcile this with a narrative of abuse? And this is where the core of the contradiction lies. If someone claims to be a victim of sustained abuse but had full autonomy to leave and return at will, we must ask, was there truly coercion, or were other psychological, emotional or personal factors at play? Factors that the public has not been encouraged to explore. This isn't about denying the possibility of emotional manipulation, but the law and society must differentiate between moral complexity and criminal coercion. Coercion in a legal sense implies a deliberate sustained action that removes the individual's freedom to choose. And yet from the available testimony, it appears that these women, while they may have felt emotionally tied to R. Kelly, were not denied their freedom of movement. Part of the challenge in this case has been the overwhelming influence of media-driven narratives. Documentaries, talk shows and editorials have painted a picture of captivity. But when you listen carefully to what the women actually said, what you hear is something quite different. You hear stories of young women inviting themselves into a celebrity lifestyle, women that wanted fame, power and attention, and then experiencing regret or emotional confusion later on, but not necessarily because they were forced. And yet somehow these inconsistencies were brushed aside. No one stopped to ask, If the doors were open, why didn't they walk out? Why return to someone who they now say abused them? Let's go back again to Diana Copeland, someone who had first-hand experience not just as a passerby, but as a staff member who worked closely with R. Kelly and was present during much of the time these allegations are said to have occurred. She didn't describe a dungeon. She didn't describe locked rooms or women screaming behind closed doors. In fact, she made it clear that people came and went as they pleased. Now, some may argue that abuse doesn't always take the form of physical restraint. They might suggest that psychological manipulation can be just as powerful. And while that is absolutely true, we cannot conflate difficult relationships or poor choices with criminal abuse. The legal definition of coercion involves a demonstrable removal of will, usually through threats, intimidation, or physical restraint. That is the threshold that must be met. And based on these stories, that threshold simply wasn't crossed. Walking out to get shoes, staying voluntarily, choosing to return, these are not the actions of individuals held against their will. If the justice system is to remain just, it must hold fast to standards of evidence, of consistency, and of logical coherence. You cannot claim to have been abused or threatened in a space where the door was always open. You cannot say you were coerced when you had full autonomy of movement. These are contradictions that deserve serious attention, not because we want to undermine anyone's story, but because truth and justice demand clarity. In the case of R. Kelly, it's imperative that we look beyond the sensational headlines and the emotionally charged narratives and actually interrogate the details. Not the sound bites, not the edited clips, but the testimonies themselves. Because when you do this, you start to see a different picture. One where the lines between victimhood and accountability become blurred and where assumptions have replaced facts. And as a society, if we allow that to stand, if we allow media judgment to replace due process, then we are all at risk. The right to a fair trial, the right to be judged based on facts, not feelings. Those are not just R. Kelly's rights. They're everyone's. So we must ask ourselves, in a case where the accusers had the power to leave, the freedom to walk away, and the choice to return, what exactly are we calling abuse? And more importantly, what are we willing to ignore in our rush to convict? If you want to be featured in our video releases, send us your clips by emailing them to hnnewsroom242@gmail.com or use Google Drive for larger files. Be sure to include your name and any details you'd like us to know. We can't wait to showcase your contributions. That is all we had for you today on HN What's Your Say. To keep updated whenever we post a new video, subscribe to this channel now. Also remember to hit the bell icon and enable notifications. And feel free to share your opinions with us in the comment section below, and let us know if you would like us to publish your views in our next release. We value all our subscribers' opinions.